Tennessee Life is sponsored by
Mid-South Sewing is an authorized brother dealer and repairs all brands of machines. Mid-South Sewing, known for their many fabrics, classes, and individual instructions. Classes on sewing and embroidery machines, software, sergers, and quilting. Mid-South Sewing, Knoxville and Murfreesboro.
Tennessee Life is also brought to you by Next to New, an upscale consignment shop serving Knoxville. Next to New Knox.com. And by The Flower Pot, for over 100 years, offering flowers and same-day delivery with 2 convenient Knoxville locations. KnoxvilleFlowerPot.com. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Coming up on this edition of Tennessee Life, glorious gardens that provide inspiration and relaxation. We visit this hilltop in Knoxville, where stone paths and steps were perfected by a doctor in his own hands over the last 4 decades.
Because when people ask me what I do, I said I'm a stonemason, but my hobby is medicine. And so over the years, we gathered ourselves, several of our co-workers, about 800 tons of rock, brought it here over years, and then used that to lay walls and patios and ponds and so on.
Plants and crops need butterflies and bees in order to thrive. We have some tips on how to attract them to your backyard.
What I would like people to understand is that those species of insects are native plants. They're supposed to be here. They help to keep us healthy and alive.
The owners of this Riverside beauty say their labor of love is meant for sharing.
For those that are young of heart and want to make the trek, just the walk on the pathways is fun, but I tell everybody if you walk down, you likewise have to walk back up.
Those stories next on Tennessee Life.
Thanks for joining us for this gardening edition of Tennessee Life. I'm Vicki Lawson. There's a special garden in Knoxville where winding paths, sculptures, and scenic views all come together. Alan Solomon is an accomplished doctor who found his own therapy outdoors by getting his hands down in the dirt. Today, this garden certainly lives up to its unique name.
Now, this may sound ludicrous, but we had no plans, absolutely no plans. The way things happened here is that we would take an area that needed something, whether a little patio or planting, and started to work with that. So it's kind of working with nature and try to enhance it if it's all possible. Gaytop stands for God's answer to our prayer. I didn't give that name to this place, but the people I bought it from had that name, and it came about because they moved here from Chattanooga in 1941. And before they moved here, one prayed that they would find a place that they would see mountains, and the other prayed that they would see water. It overlooks the Tennessee River and the Great Smoky Mountains. So we had the water and the mountains. So they were overjoyed and said, that's God's answer to our prayer. So that's what GATOP stands for. I thought that was a good name, so I kept it. I grew up in the Bronx and never saw a tree. This is sort of a culmination of a dream I had when I was 8 years old, a long time ago. We were living in the Bronx, and my father, who was an attorney, took me one Saturday up to Chappaqua, which is a suburb of New York City. And the client he was visiting, when we got there, was riding on a tractor. And it was a big expanse with no other houses. And I was entranced with it. And also the number of dogs running around. And so before I left, and again, I was 8 years old, I looked around and I said, when I grow up, I'd like to find a place that I cannot see anybody, that I have to have a lot of dogs, and the house would be made of wood. And that's what exactly happened. It's amazing that the dream came true. I came in June of 1966, and thought at that time I was only going to stay for 2 years. So here it is, more than 50 years later, I'm still here. After I came here, I established a large research program involving cancer and blood diseases. And that expanded. I had the opportunity to go to other universities, but after finding this place and living here for a period of time and getting to love the area, love the people, they couldn't pay me enough to move somewhere else. You know, the nature of the work with patients with cancer and, of course, their families can be very stressful. And so without really realizing it, Gaytop became a place for me as a refuge to leave some of those terrible situations behind and just focus on the land and whatever we were building or planting. I would often get wonderful ideas as I'd be working or planting or doing something. An idea would cross my mind that related to the work or patients and so on. So it was an interesting thing that it was beneficial to me and then eventually to the patients or to my research. And I would get into the dirtiest work, and with some of that equipment and so on, your hands get pretty dirty and under your nails, and it's almost impossible to clean it no matter how you scrub. And it was kind of embarrassing to examine patients with hands like that. One of the things that's really satisfying about this gardening or the work that we do, usually at the end of the day, you could see what you've done. Most jobs that we have, at the end of the day, you really can't see whether it made much difference. But here, if you plant something or build something, you can see it, so it's very satisfying in that way. Having a place like this to work outside really was very, very rewarding and also kept me in good shape. By good fortune, I met a man who worked at the hospital who worked on the side in outdoor projects. There was a need of steps going down from the top all the way down to the bottom, and it was very hazardous. There were really no regular steps. So I asked him about it, and he said yes, he could make those steps. So he started to work with his grandson on Saturday mornings. And after a couple of weeks, I watched it. This looks awful interesting. I said, could I help on that? He said, sure. And so that started my main career as a stonemason. Because when people ask me what I do, I said I'm a stonemason, but my hobby is medicine. And so over the years, we gathered ourselves, several of our co-workers, about 800 tons of rock, brought it here over years, and then used that to lay walls and patios and ponds and so on. And we have a great love for rock, great appreciation for it. There are a number of sculptural pieces here in stone, stainless steel, bronze, and so on, copper. That interest, I think, came from my upbringing in New York City. My parents lived across from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and I would love to see the works there and so on. For some reason, got really excited about frogs as a sculptural element or humorous element. And years ago, we visited the Atlanta Botanical Gardens. And interspersed in the garden were these large copper frogs, almost life-size. And these frogs were playing violins or drinking champagne or doing all kinds of things. And they were really humorous. And so we acquired several of those and got more and more into frogs. And so when people come here, as I say, especially the kids, one of the challenges I say is how many frogs can you find? And of course, they're all the artificial, so-called artificial frogs, but many live frogs sitting on the ponds or whatever, and so they're all excited about how many they can count. And to watch the kids run around is really exciting. You see them climb on these boulders and so on. It's a wonderful play place for them.
So we got the map.
It's always been I guess, a pleasure for me to welcome garden clubs that come. And it's interesting to see people's reactions. Some, kind of walk through very quickly, like if you go to a museum and some people just kind of walk through. And other people stop and study and look at things. And a few people sit, because to really enjoy a garden, like, you can't just kind of walk through it. You have to kind of sit. It's like hiking in the Smokies too. You have to sit and smell and hear and taste the place and just become part of the land. This garden not only is a refuge, but also it's an educational resource. a way of learning and appreciate nature, and maybe some people want to know more. You know, they'll see a few wildflowers and they wonder what it is and then become more interested in it and so on. People are amazed, not realizing that this is in Knoxville that close. And one adjective that I hear over and over again is the word spiritual. And people say there's a spiritual feeling here, a holy feeling, or healing is the other word, a very healing place to sit and just listen and be quiet.
Later on Tennessee Life, how an initial love for a house blossomed into an amazing outdoor space. But next, learn how small changes in your own backyard can support the butterfly population.
Butterflies and bees play a key part in helping gardens thrive, so their dwindling populations have become a big concern. The folks at Stanley's Greenhouse are trying to do their part by releasing monarchs on their property. They have some advice for attracting these natural beauties to your own yard.
Butterflies are some of the most beautiful insects in our garden, so we're really excited to host this festival for the first time. We're really excited about the release of the monarchs. Hopefully, in my mind's eye, my vision is there are going to be a lot of children around and a lot of people witnessing this event. We're hosting our first ever annual festival for butterflies here at Stanley's Greenhouse called On the Wing. And again, it comes out of this passion of really supporting our species of pollinators. We started in the beginning of the year to focus more on our native bee species.
We're trying to get people to promote planting flowers that attract pollinators. So you need to plant flowers that have a lot of nectar, or they're good host plants for the caterpillar stage. The opportunity is really out there now for us to be able to benefit not only ourselves but the whole environment, the whole pollinating system, and to put more bees and butterflies out there to pollinate our food crops as well. Because if we don't have the pollinators, our food production is going to be way drastically reduced. When we found out they were available to purchase, we thought this would be a great opportunity to release and see people actually see the butterflies flying out over the meadow.
You're free, you're free.
Then these monarchs will integrate into the population we already have, and they'll be migrating back to Mexico.
Some of these monarchs will end up back in the same groves of trees that they first came up from in January and February of this year. So the monarchs that we release, there's a potential that they're going to meet up with their monarch friends and then travel back down south to Mexico. So we hope that happens. That is ultimately our goal here. The reason why it's so important is that I think a lot of people don't realize that 1 out of every 3 bites of food comes from a pollinator species. If we lose our pollinators, we lose our food, we lose our crops.
By planting these perennials that attract butterflies, you're able to, provide food source for them and help the population rebound. There's so many different flowers now that can be planted for that purpose. The asters, eupatorium, chrysanthemums. Basically, any kind of a flower that has a little daisy-shaped bloom is really good for butterflies because it gives them a little place to land and sip the nectar out of the blooms.
Native plants are acclimated to our climate cycles and soil types, so it makes most sense to install native plants into your landscape and gardens. And the pollinator species, because there's been such a decline not only in non-natives such as the honeybee, the hummingbird, and the monarch, but primarily in our native species of pollinators, like our bee species and butterflies. So Monty and I decided over the past few years to really begin to build up the native plant section and to educate and inform our customers and the public about the importance of bringing those very important insects into our yards.
Well, for the nectar source, I think the best one is our native Joe Pye weed. The cone flowers are great pollinators. Wherever you see those, you'll have butterflies around. And then there's other plants that are grown as hosts, like the butterfly weed, Asclepias, there's a tuberosa, and the incarnata. I've always felt like we were very blessed to be able to be in this kind of a business because we're helping to improve the environment and we're doing beautification at the same time. And now we're able to, help increase the pollinator population. So it's really an exciting time, and it's a whole new area that we're becoming familiar with because there's certain plants that we grow as a nectar source, and then there's also host plants that we grow to feed the caterpillar stage.
What I would like people to understand is that those species of insects are native plants. They're supposed to be here. They help to keep us healthy and alive, and it's never just a drop in the bucket. That's the incredible thing about the numbers of monarchs and their decline. About a decade ago, they actually declined by 90%. So in the world, there were only 10% of monarchs left. Well, because of the great efforts of greenhouses, growers, a home gardener, people that now grow those insects themselves, it has increased substantially. So they're supposed to be here. Nothing is ever a drop in the bucket. If you just take one plant home and you draw one kind of bee species, you're making a difference.
Now for a garden so beautiful, it has even been featured in Southern Living magazine. Joe and Sharon Price may live in the city of Knoxville, but step into the Riverside Garden and you'll feel like you've escaped into a blooming oasis, one they love to share with visitors.
Sharon and I both love the gardens. We love creating the gardens. We love walking in the gardens. It's a very serene to be able to walk down and sit on the boat dock and have a glass of wine. It's peaceful, it can be serene, it can be very hard work. It's just home to me.
Well, it's been a roller coaster ride because we started off overgrown. We cultivated just the first property. After my late husband died, I thought I was maintaining the property, but I realized it was getting more and more overgrown. Joe and I get married. Now we've really cleaned things up. And we've got more people who really understand about our garden who are helping us with it now. And I think that they enjoy our garden as much as we do. My late husband and I bought this property in 1984. Not much of anything could you see because it was all totally overgrown. So as you walk through the garden and you see the stone walls and the stone walkways, those are all original to the house from 1922. So my original rose garden had, I think, about 45 roses in it, and I knew which ones were fragrant and which ones would hold in arrangements. Joe and I started dating. He knew what the petal count was.
Petal count just tells you the size of the rose. So the larger the petal count, the larger the rose.
He knew actually more about the roses than I knew about roses. We never envisioned a formal rose garden with 120 hybrid teas, but it's a gorgeous design and we thoroughly enjoy it.
I came across gardening later in life. I started trying to grow roses and was not very successful, and then started studying growing of roses and learned kind of how to do it and how to take care of them, how to fertilize them. And so my main focus in the garden was roses. And then when Sharon and I got together and I came over here, you can see this is a vast garden, and so I had to really broadened my interest into ferns and hostas, and then we greatly expanded the rose garden here. But it was roses that got me interested in gardening. So Sharon and I got married in 2006, and I started working on pulling the weeds and cleaning the garden up on the property that we had, and planting some more things and taking care of the roses that we had here. And at the time we had 45 roses in a rose garden down on the river. After we purchased the property next door, we moved our rose garden up here. There are numerous unique things to this garden. That pond and patio were unique to the house that we tore down when we bought the property next door. And that is a great entryway into the garden. The temple, Sharon's late husband, Bill Miller, bought those columns, and they had come out of a bank in Nashville. And we had stonemasons out of Atlanta created the steps and the temple structure around those columns. So that's a very unique feature for this garden. Then we have the knot garden, which is Korean boxwood and variegated Korean boxwood. That is an English knot garden, and from its standing by the temple looking down, you get a very nice 3D effect, and that is our vegetable garden there, and it's the centerpiece of our vegetable garden. And then as you walk down to the next terrace, you can visit that and see it from a whole different perspective. So we greatly enjoy the knot garden. And then for those that are young of heart and want to make the trek, just the walk on the pathways through the slope garden is fun, but I tell everybody, if you walk down, you likewise have to walk back up.
We figure we spend so much time and money and effort in this garden, we might as well share it with others. So it's really been our pleasure to share the garden with the community, whether it's not-for-profits or the University of Tennessee.
Sharon and I both obviously love this garden. We are very proud of what has been created here, and there have been numerous folks that have helped us create the garden that we have today. And one of the greatest joys is to be able to share it with people. I've done probably 10 area garden clubs that we've hosted over here for them to walk and see this garden. We've been a featured garden on the Dogwood Arch. We have opened the garden for rose societies from Michigan and numerous places. So we obviously love doing it, and we love being able to share it with folks. This garden was featured in Southern Living in 2013. That was a fun time for us, and the garden, we worked really hard. All our folks worked really hard, and the garden was in fabulous shape. The summertime gets a little hot, and thank goodness we have the river, so we have a water source. It's not usually too cold, so that most of your plants will survive a terrible winter. So I think it's a wonderful place to have a garden.
Well, we can talk about working in the garden, but the reality is we've got this bucket that has 3 tubes, and we put water in 2 of the tubes, and we put a wine bottle in the 3rd tube, and we go for a walk in the garden with clippers. And thank goodness we have people who are doing the majority of the weeding now, and we're just cutting flowers and just relaxing and enjoying walking in the garden. And it depends on the time of day and what's in bloom as to what the favorite place is. We've got a lot of different places to sit and have quiet time.
We have a Cairn Terrier and a Cairn Doodle, and they love the garden as much as we do because they get to run around and chase critters, so it's a family affair. We enjoy walking the garden paths at night or in the evening, and seeing what everything's doing, look at what's blooming, look at how it's matured over the years and what's growing where, what's running and spreading, what's not, what we have to add back. That's kind of how we utilize the garden and make it kind of therapeutic for both of us. Tennessee's a great place to have a garden.
We hope our program has given you some inspiration that you can take into your own yard and garden this summer. I'm Vicki Lawson. See you on the next Tennessee Life.
Tennessee Life is sponsored by
Mid-South Sewing is an authorized brother dealer and repairs all brands of machines. Mid-South Sewing, known for their many fabrics, classes, and individual instructions. Classes on sewing and embroidery machines, software, sergers, and quilting. Mid-South Sewing, Knoxville and Murfreesboro.
Tennessee Life is also brought to you by Next to New, an upscale consignment shop serving Knoxville. Next to new Knox.com. And by The Flower Pot, for over 100 years, offering flowers and same-day delivery with 2 convenient Knoxville locations, KnoxvilleFlowerPot.com. And by viewers like you. Thank you